The moment Elena Moore witnessed a man's execution in her school parking lot, her ordinary life died with him. But when Dominic Ravello, the ruthless crime boss who pulled the trigger, decided she was worth more alive than dead, her nightmare truly began. Forced into a marriage that existed only on paper, Elena became the wife of the city's most dangerous man. Yet somewhere between survival and submission, between fear and something far more dangerous, the line between captor and protector began to blur. Stay until the end to discover how a witness, who should have been silenced, became the only woman powerful enough to stand beside a king of criminals. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Elena's story travels. The rain came down in sheets that Friday night, turning the world into a watercolor painting, bleeding at the edges. Elena Moore sat in her decade-old Honda Civic, engine idling, watching the downpour assault her windshield with a violence that matched the storm brewing in her chest. The school parking lot stretched empty before her, illuminated only by the sickly yellow glow of streetlights fighting a losing battle against the dark. She should have left an hour ago. Should have been home, microwaving leftovers, grading papers, pretending that 26 felt less like drowning and more like living. But the stack of overdue bills in her passenger seat, electric, water, student loans that had grown teeth and claws, had kept her frozen in place, calculator in hand, trying to make mathematics bend to mercy. It wouldn't. The numbers never did. Elena pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, exhaling slowly. 3 jobs. She worked 3 jobs and still couldn't breathe above water. Art teacher by day, waitress on weekends, online tutor most nights. And still, every month, the deficit grew. Her father's medical bills from before he died continued to arrive like ghosts demanding payment. Her mother's nursing home costs consumed everything else. She was 26 years old and had nothing. No savings, no future, no one. The thought tasted like rust. She was reaching for her keys when the headlights appeared. 2 cars, moving fast, water spraying from their tires in violent arcs. They shouldn't have been there. The school had been closed for hours. The faculty lot empty except for Elena's pathetic vehicle tucked against the far fence. She straightened, instinct whispering warnings her conscious mind hadn't yet processed. The cars stopped 30 yards away, positioned to block the only exit. Elena's breath caught. Her hand found her phone, fingers trembling as she tried to decide, call someone? Drive? But go where? The cars had her boxed in, and something in the way they'd positioned themselves spoke of intention, of planning, of purpose. The doors opened. 4 men emerged from the first car, 3 from the second. Even through the rain-blurred windshield, Elena could see they moved with the coordinated precision of people who'd done this before, whatever this was. She should have ducked, should have slid down in her seat, made herself invisible, small, forgettable. But horror had paralyzed her, turned her into a spectator at her own disaster. One man was dragged from the second car. His hands were bound behind his back, his face already bloodied. He stumbled, fell to his knees on the wet asphalt, and even through the storm Elena heard him begging, "Please, please, I can get the money. 2 more weeks, that's all I need. Please, Mr. Ravello, please." The name hit Elena like a fist. Ravello. Even she knew that name, had heard it whispered in the teacher's lounge, seen it in newspaper headlines that always seemed to lead nowhere, charges that never stuck. The Ravellos owned half the city, the legal half, and all of the illegal darkness beneath. A man stepped forward from the group, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Elena's car. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to occupy space, to take what he wanted, to remake the world according to his will. Dominic Ravello. It had to be. Elena couldn't see his face clearly through the rain, but she could see the gun in his hand. 2 weeks, Dominic said, his voice carrying even through the storm. 2 weeks, you said. That was 8 months ago, Marcus. I've been patient. I'll get it. I swear to God, I'll get it. Don't. The single word cracked like a whip. Don't invoke God in my presence. You made a deal with the devil. Payments come due. Marcus was sobbing now, hands still bound, rain and tears mixing on his face. My family, please, my family. Should have thought about them before you stole from me. The gun rose. Marcus's begging reached a fever pitch, words tumbling over each other, incoherent with terror. Elena wanted to close her eyes, to look away, to unsee what was about to happen. But shock had turned her muscles to stone. The gunshot was surprisingly quiet, almost polite, just a pop that the thunder immediately swallowed. Marcus crumpled forward, his begging cut off mid-word. The rain continued falling. The storm didn't pause. The world kept turning, indifferent to one more death in a city that collected them like coins. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the scream clawing up her throat. Her phone slipped from her other hand, clattering onto the passenger seat. The sound seemed impossibly loud. One of the men turned, pointed. "Boss, the car." Dominic Ravello's head swiveled toward her. Even through the rain and darkness, even across 30 yards of asphalt, Elena felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing, like a hand closing around her throat. "Take care of it," he said. The words were casual, unbothered, as if he'd just ordered coffee. Two men started walking toward her car. Elena's paralysis shattered. Her hands fumbled for the keys still in the ignition, twisting, the engine roaring to life. But the exit was blocked. The only way out was through them, or... She threw the car in reverse, tires screaming as she yanked the wheel. The Honda fishtailed wildly, nearly spinning out. She corrected, overcorrected, her heart a drum in her chest beating so hard it hurt. The fence. If she could reach the fence on the far side, there was a service road beyond it, a gap where the chain link had rusted through. She'd seen maintenance workers use it. Headlights flooded her rearview mirror. They were following. Of course they were following. Elena pressed the accelerator to the floor. The Honda's ancient engine whined in protest, but it moved, racing backward across the parking lot. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the wheel. Tears blurred her vision, or maybe that was rain, she couldn't tell anymore. The fence rushed toward her. At the last second, she cranked the wheel, spinning the car around. The tires caught, and she was moving forward now, racing toward the gap she prayed she'd remembered correctly. There, 20 feet ahead. The break in the fence, just wide enough for... Her car hit the gap at 40 miles an hour. Metal screamed as the fence caught both sides, scraping paint and tearing trim. But she was through, bouncing onto the service road, the Honda's suspension groaning. Behind her, the larger vehicles couldn't follow. Too wide. She'd bought herself seconds, maybe a minute. Elena navigated the service road by instinct and prayer, emerging onto a side street she barely recognized. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely drive. She needed to get away, needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere public, somewhere with people and lights and her phone. She needed to call the police. Elena risked a glance at the passenger seat. Her phone sat there, screen dark. She grabbed it, nearly swerving into a parked car, and thumbed it alive. No signal. The storm must have knocked out the towers. A sob escaped her throat. She was in her old neighborhood now, the streets familiar from her childhood. But nothing was open, no lights and windows. Everyone sensible was home and dry and safe. And she was... Headlights appeared behind her. "No," Elena whispered. "No, no, no!" They'd found her. Somehow they'd found her. She took a hard right, then another, weaving through residential streets, trying to lose them. But they stayed with her, matching every turn, and her car was old, slow, dying. She couldn't outrun them forever. Ahead, she saw it. The old church at the end of Maple Street, the one that had been abandoned for years, scheduled for demolition. She and her friends had explored it as teenagers, knew every entrance, every hiding place. Elena made a desperate decision. She killed her headlights and yanked the wheel, pulling into the church's overgrown parking lot. The Honda bounced over broken asphalt and disappeared behind the building. She threw it in park, killed the engine, and ran. The rain soaked her in seconds, plastering her clothes to her skin, her dark hair to her face. She ran for the church's side entrance, the door that had been broken for a decade. Her hands found the rotted wood, pushed, and she was inside. Darkness swallowed her. The church smelled of mold and decay and forgotten prayers. Elena pressed herself against the wall, chest heaving, trying to breathe quietly, trying to think. Outside, she heard car doors slamming. They were here, Elena moved deeper into the church, navigating by memory and the occasional flash of lightning through broken windows. The sanctuary opened before her, pews still in place but rotting, the altar stripped of anything valuable. She remembered the choir loft, the small room behind it where, "She's in here." The voice came from the entrance, male, calm, like they were hunting an animal, something expected to run. Elena bit down on her hand to keep from whimpering. She found the stairs to the choir loft, climbed them on hands and knees, each creak of wood like a gunshot in the silence. Spread out. Find her. Multiple footsteps now. They were inside. They were searching. The choir loft had a storage room, barely more than a closet. Elena squeezed inside, pulling the door nearly shut, leaving just a crack to see through. Her entire body was shaking, cold and terror and the certainty that she was about to die. She'd witnessed a murder. She could identify them. There was no scenario where they let her live. The beam of a flashlight swept through the sanctuary below. Then another. They were systematic, professional. This wasn't their first time hunting someone. Clear down here. Check upstairs. Footsteps on the stairs. Getting closer. Elena pressed herself into the corner of the storage room, making herself as small as possible. She could see through the crack in the door, a wedge of the choir loft, the top of the stairs. A man appeared. Tall, muscular, wearing expensive clothes now soaked with rain. He swept his flashlight across the space, the beam cutting through darkness like a blade. The light paused on the storage room door. Elena stopped breathing. The man walked toward her. 5 steps. 4. 3. His hand reached for the doorknob. Enough. The new voice came from the sanctuary below, deep, commanding. The kind of voice that didn't repeat itself. The man's hand paused. Boss? I said enough. Dominic Ravello stepped into view at the base of the stairs. Even from above, even in the darkness, he radiated authority. She's not here. Probably drove straight to the police station. But the car is a decoy. She dumped it and ran. We're wasting time. Dominic turned, dismissing the conversation. Pull back. We'll handle this through other channels. Elena watched the man hesitate, clearly wanting to argue, to finish the search. But Dominic's word was law. The man turned and descended the stairs. She heard them leave. Car doors. Engines. The sound of vehicles pulling away. Silence settled over the church like a shroud. Elena stayed frozen in her hiding spot, convinced it was a trick, that they were waiting for her to emerge. Minutes crawled past. 5, 10, 20. Nothing. Her legs had gone numb from crouching. Slowly, moving like an old woman, Elena eased the storage room door open. The choir loft was empty. She crept to the railing, looked down. The sanctuary was empty. They were gone. Elena's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the rotting floor of the choir loft, wrapped her arms around herself, and shook. The adrenaline was leaving her system, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion and the surreal unreality of what had just happened. She'd witnessed a murder, been hunted, nearly caught, and somehow, impossibly, Dominic Ravello had called off the search. Why? The question circled her mind, finding no answer. Men like that didn't show mercy, didn't leave witnesses. Unless he believed she'd gone to the police, unless he thought she was already someone else's problem. Elena pulled out her phone. Signal had returned. Her hands trembled as she pulled up the keypad, started to dial 911, and stopped. If she went to the police, what would she say? She'd witnessed a murder by Dominic Ravello, a man who owned half the city, who had judges and cops on his payroll. The newspapers said charges against him never stuck. Witnesses disappeared. If she testified, if she tried to do the right thing, she was dead. If not tomorrow, then next week, next month. Men like Ravello had long memories and longer reach. But if she said nothing, if she pretended tonight never happened, could she do that? Could she live with herself? Elena sat in the darkness of the abandoned church, phone in her hand, and realized she was facing an impossible choice. Come forward and die a moral person. Stay silent and live as a coward. Neither option felt like living at all. She didn't know how long she sat there. Long enough for the rain to stop. Long enough for the sky to shift from black to the deep blue of early morning. long enough for her phone battery to drop to 15%. Finally, stiff and frozen, Elena stood. She made her way back down the stairs through the sanctuary, out into the pre-dawn stillness. Her car sat where she'd left it, untouched. They really had gone. She drove home in a daze, her apartment building appearing like a mirage. Third floor, end of the hall, the door that didn't quite close right. She barely remembered walking up the stairs. Inside, Elena stripped off her wet clothes, turned the shower as hot as it would go, and stood under the spray until the water ran cold. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel, she caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked like a ghost, pale, hollowed out, haunted. Elena Moore, art teacher, drowning in debt, invisible to the world. Except now someone had seen her, and that someone was the most dangerous man in the city. She crawled into bed as the sun rose, pulled the covers over her head, and prayed for sleep that wouldn't come. Behind her eyelids, she saw Marcus falling, heard the quiet pop of the gun, felt Dominic Ravello's gaze cutting through the darkness. She'd escaped, for now, but Elena had the terrible, certain feeling that her life, her quiet, desperate, drowning life, had just ended in that parking lot. And whatever came next would be nothing like the future she'd imagined. The debt that worried her yesterday seemed laughably small now. She'd just incurred a debt that couldn't be calculated. One measured in blood and silence and the weight of secrets that could get her killed. 3 days later. Elena went through the motions of living like a sleepwalker. Monday morning, she showed up to Riverside Academy, taught her classes, smiled at her students, pretended the world hadn't tilted off its axis. The parking lot where she'd witnessed murder looked exactly the same. The rain had washed away any evidence. Life continued, indifferent. No police came, no detectives knocked on her door. The news made no mention of a body found, though Elena searched obsessively every hour. It was as if Marcus had never existed, as if Friday night had been a nightmare her mind invented. Except it hadn't been. Tuesday was the same. Wednesday. She went to work, served tables at the restaurant, tutored kids online, all while glancing over her shoulder, jumping at shadows, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped Thursday evening. Elena was in her apartment, microwaving ramen because that's what poverty tasted like when someone knocked on her door. 3 firm raps, professional, patient. Her blood turned to ice. Through the peephole, she saw 2 men in suits. Not police. Their clothing was too expensive, their bearing too comfortable. They looked like corporate executives, or very well-dressed thugs. "Miss Moore," one of them called. "We need to speak with you. It's important." Elena pressed her back against the door, heart hammering. "I don't know what you're talking about." "It's about Friday night." The words hung in the air like a guillotine. "We're not here to hurt you," the second man said. His voice was softer, almost kind. "But we do need to talk. And Miss Moore, we can have this conversation here, or somewhere more private. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice. Elena knew that. If she didn't open the door, they'd just come back. Or worse. With shaking hands, she unlocked the deadbolt. The men entered her apartment like they owned it, their eyes cataloging everything. The shabby furniture, the stack of bills, the ramen cooling on her counter. Judging her, finding her wanting. "Miss Moore," the first man said. He was older, graying at the temples, with eyes that had seen things that would make Elena's nightmares look tame. "My name is Victor. This is James. We work for Mr. Ravello." Elena's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the back of a chair to stay upright. "I didn't see anything," she whispered. Victor's expression didn't change. "We both know that's not true." "I won't say anything. I promise. I'll forget it ever happened. Please, sit down, Miss Moore." It wasn't a request. Elena sat. James moved to her window, looking out at the street below, standing guard, making sure no one interrupted. Victor took the chair across from her, settling into it like he had all the time in the world. "Friday night was unfortunate. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time, we understand that." "Then let me go, please. I won't." "The problem," Victor continued, as if she hadn't spoken, "is that you can identify Mr. Ravello. You can identify several of his associates. You're a liability." The word landed like a stone in Elena's stomach. "Normally," Victor said, his tone almost conversational. Liabilities are eliminated. It's cleaner that way, simpler. But Mr. Ravello has taken an interest in your situation. Elena's mouth had gone dry. My situation? Your debts, your father's medical bills, your mother's care, the 3 jobs you work just to stay afloat. You're drowning, Miss Moore, and Mr. Ravello is offering you a lifeline. I don't understand. Victor leaned forward. He's offering you a choice. You can refuse, of course, free will and all that, but I'd encourage you to listen carefully before deciding. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Option 1. You disappear. Tonight. We provide you with a new identity, relocate you somewhere far from here, give you enough money to start over. But you can never come back. Never contact anyone from your previous life. Your mother, your friends, everyone you know, they all believe you're dead, because for all intents and purposes, you are. The thought of abandoning her mother, leaving her alone in that nursing home, not even able to say goodbye, Elena felt tears burning her eyes. Option 2, Victor said quietly. You marry Mr. Ravello. The words made no sense. Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? You become his wife. Legally. A marriage license, a ceremony, all of it legitimate and binding. That's insane. It's business. Victor's expression remained neutral. Mr. Ravello needs a wife for legal and social purposes. You need protection and financial security. It's mutually beneficial. Why would he? Elena couldn't form a complete sentence. The idea was so absurd, so disconnected from reality. Because a wife has spousal privilege, Victor explained patiently as if discussing a business merger. She can't be forced to testify against her husband, and Mr. Ravello's wife would be untouchable by his enemies. No one would dare harm her. You'd be the safest person in the city. This is crazy. This is your life now. Victor's voice hardened slightly. You witnessed something you shouldn't have. That can't be undone. These are your only options. Choose. And if I refuse both? The silence that followed answered her question more clearly than words. Elena looked at James by the window, at Victor watching her with those merciless eyes, and understood that she was a dead woman walking, had been since Friday night. The only question was which version of death she chose. Disappear and lose everyone she loved, or marry a stranger, a murderer, and keep the shell of her life. Some choice. I need time, she whispered. You have 30 seconds, Victor said. Mr. Ravello is a busy man. He won't wait. 30 seconds to decide the rest of her life. 30 seconds to choose between impossible options. Elena thought of her mother, confused and fading in the nursing home, asking every visit when Elena would bring her home. Thought of her students who looked at her like she mattered, like she made a difference. Thought of the life she'd built, small and struggling though it was. Could she walk away from all of it? If I marry him, Elena heard herself say, voice barely audible, what exactly would that mean? What would he expect from me? A wife in name only, Victor replied. You'd live in his home, attend certain social functions, present the appearance of a marriage, but your private lives would remain separate. It's a legal arrangement, nothing more. For how long? That would be between you and Mr. Ravello. Elena closed her eyes, opened them. The apartment looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. She could feel her life splitting, the before and after of this moment already carved into her bones. I'll do it, she whispered. I'll marry him. Victor nodded, as if he'd never doubted her answer. He stood, buttoning his jacket. Someone will contact you tomorrow with details. In the meantime, tell no one about this conversation. Go to work, maintain your routine, act normal. How am I supposed to act normal? The question came out bitter, half laughing. For the first time, something like sympathy crossed Victor's face. You learn, Miss Moore. We all do. They left as quietly as they'd arrived. Elena sat in her silent apartment, ramen forgotten, bills still stacked on her table, and tried to process what had just happened. She was going to marry Dominic Ravello, the man who'd killed Marcus in cold blood, the crime lord who owned half the city, a stranger who'd decided her life was worth more as his legal shield than as a corpse in an alley. Elena started laughing. It came out broken, edged with hysteria. This wasn't real, couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. She was nobody, invisible, drowning in debt and obscurity. Except now she'd been seen, and there was no going back to invisible. The laughter died. Elena walked to her bathroom, stared at herself in the mirror again. Same face, same brown eyes, same dark hair, same features that had never warranted a second glance. In a few days, she'd be the wife of the most dangerous man in the city, and she had no idea if she'd just saved her life or signed her death warrant. The wedding happened on a gray Saturday morning that felt like a funeral. Elena stood in a boutique she'd never heard of, in a neighborhood where even the air smelled expensive, while three women she'd never met pinned her into a dress that cost more than 6 months of her rent. The gown was beautiful, ivory silk that draped like water, delicate lace at the shoulders, a train that whispered against marble floors. It was also a costume for a role she'd never auditioned for. Breathtaking, one of the attendants murmured, adjusting the veil. "Mr. Ravello will be very pleased." Elena said nothing. What was there to say? That she felt like a mannequin being dressed for display? That every stitch felt like a chain? That she wanted to tear the dress off and run until her legs gave out? She stood silent and let them work. The past 48 hours had moved with the efficiency of a military operation. Friday morning, a car had arrived at her apartment, sleek, black, windows tinted dark enough to hide sins. The driver, a man who introduced himself only as Marco, had handed her an envelope containing more cash than she'd seen in her lifetime and a handwritten note on expensive card stock. "Your debts have been handled. Your mother's care is secured for life. The wedding is tomorrow at 10. Address has been selected. Victor will collect you at 8. No signature. None needed." Elena had counted the money 3 times, certain it was fake, that this was all some elaborate trick. But when she'd called the hospital billing department, stammering through questions about her father's outstanding charges, the woman on the phone had cheerfully informed her the account had been paid in full. When she'd called her mother's nursing home, same story. Every bill, every debt, every suffocating weight she'd carried for years, gone. Bought and paid for, just like her. Now standing in this boutique mirror, Elena barely recognized herself. The woman reflected back looked elegant, poised, expensive. Nothing like the art teacher who microwaved ramen and wore the same 3 outfits on rotation. "All finished," the head attendant announced. "You're perfect." Perfect. The word tasted like ashes. Victor arrived precisely at 8 the next morning, as promised. He looked her over with the same neutral expression he'd worn in her apartment, nodded once, and gestured to the waiting car. "Any questions?" he asked as they drove through the city. Elena had 1,000. She asked the only one that mattered. "What happens after?" "After the ceremony, you'll move into Mr. Ravello's residence. Your belongings are already being transferred." "You went into my apartment?" "Your lease has been terminated. Your landlord has been compensated. It's handled." Handled. Everything was handled. Her life dismantled and reassembled without her input, as if she were a problem to solve rather than a person. "Will I see him?" The question came out smaller than she'd intended. "Before the ceremony?" "No, Mr. Ravello is attending to business. You'll meet at the altar." "Of course." Why would a groom need to meet his bride? This wasn't a marriage, it was a merger. The venue was a private estate on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that didn't appear on maps, that existed in the gaps between public record and private wealth. High walls, manicured gardens, the sort of beauty that came with armed security, hidden among the roses. Victor led her through a side entrance, up marble stairs, into a room that looked like it belonged in a European palace. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, antique furniture that probably cost more than Elena's childhood home, fresh flowers in crystal vases, a gilded cage. "Someone will come for you when it's time," Victor said, and left her alone. Elena walked to the window, pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Outside, she could see men in dark suits positioned at strategic points around the property. Security. Or guards. Probably both. She was getting married in less than an hour to a man she'd never spoken to. A man who'd murdered someone in front of her. A man who'd bought her like property and called it protection. The door opened behind her. Elena turned, expecting Victor. Instead, a woman entered. Older, maybe 60, with silver hair pulled into an elegant knot and eyes that held the kind of wisdom that came from surviving things that should have killed you. Elena Moore, the woman said. It wasn't a question. I'm Catherine. I manage Mr. Ravello's household. Nice to meet you. The polite response came automatically, absurdly. Catherine's lips curved slightly. Is it? She moved further into the room, her gaze assessing Elena with the same clinical efficiency Victor had shown. I imagine this is all quite overwhelming. That's one word for it. May I speak plainly? Elena almost laughed. I don't think anyone's worried about my feelings at this point. Then let me tell you what you need to know. Catherine sat in one of the antique chairs, gestured for Elena to do the same. Dominic Ravello is many things. Dangerous, ruthless, unforgiving to his enemies. But he is not unnecessarily cruel, and he does not make promises he won't keep. He didn't promise me anything. He gave me an ultimatum. He gave you a choice. There's a difference. Catherine's voice remained calm, matter-of-fact. You could have chosen to disappear. You chose this instead. That tells me you're practical. Good. You'll need that. Elena's hands twisted in her lap. What exactly am I walking into? What does he expect? Publicly? You'll be his wife. You'll attend certain functions, host certain gatherings, present a united front. You'll live in his home, wear his ring, carry his name. And privately? That depends entirely on you both. Catherine's expression softened slightly. This is a business arrangement. Dominic understands that. He won't demand what wasn't negotiated, but Elena, she leaned forward. The world you're entering is not the one you left. The people in Dominic's life, the situations you'll encounter, they operate by different rules. You'll need to learn quickly, and you'll need to decide who you are in this new world. I don't want to be in this world at all. Perhaps not, but you are. The question is whether you'll be a victim of it or a participant in it. Before Elena could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Victor's voice came through. It's time. Catherine stood, smoothed her skirt. One last thing. Dominic chose to spare your life when he didn't have to. That means something. What it means is up to you to discover. Then she was gone, and Victor was there offering his arm like this was a normal wedding, like Elena was a normal bride. The walk to the ceremony felt like a dream, or a nightmare. The line had blurred. They'd set up the wedding in a private chapel on the grounds, small and intimate in a way that would have been romantic under different circumstances. Maybe 20 people in attendance, all of them strangers. All of them watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to calculation. And at the altar, waiting with his hands clasped behind his back, stood Dominic Ravello. Elena's steps faltered. He was taller than she'd realized, broader through the shoulders. The suit he wore was impeccable, charcoal gray that probably cost more than her car had. Dark hair, strong features, the kind of face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so cold. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Gray-blue, like storm clouds, assessing her with the same intensity he'd shown in that parking lot. He was 34, she'd learned from Victor, 8 years older than her. He'd built an empire from his father's legacy and expanded it into something that touched every corner of the city. Legal businesses and illegal ones all tangled together so thoroughly that law enforcement couldn't pull one thread without unraveling everything. And now he was going to be her husband. Victor released her arm. Elena stood alone at the altar, facing Dominic, while a minister she didn't recognize opened a leather-bound book. "Dearly beloved," he began, and Elena had to bite back hysterical laughter at the absurdity. The ceremony was mercifully brief. Traditional vows that meant nothing, promises neither of them intended to keep. Dominic's voice was steady when he spoke. No hesitation, no emotion. He could have been reading a grocery list. "Do you, Elena Marie Moore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" This was it. Her last chance to refuse, to choose the other option, to disappear into a new identity and leave everything behind. Elena looked into Dominic's eyes and found nothing there. No warmth, no reassurance. Just cool calculation and the patience of someone who'd already won. "I do," she whispered. "And do you, Dominic Alexander Ravello, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "The rings, please." Victor stepped forward, produced 2 platinum bands that caught the light. Dominic took one, reached for Elena's hand. His fingers were warm, solid. The ring slid onto her finger with surprising gentleness, settling there like a shackle. Elena's hand shook as she took the second ring, reached for Dominic's hand. His fingers dwarfed hers, strong and calloused in ways that spoke of violence she didn't want to imagine. She slipped the ring on, and something in his expression shifted. Not softness, exactly, but acknowledgement. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Dominic's hand came up to cup her jaw. The touch was firm, but not rough, possessive, but not cruel. He leaned in, and Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. The kiss was brief, chaste. His lips barely brushed hers, there and gone in a heartbeat. But Elena felt it like a brand, like ownership being claimed. When he pulled back, Dominic's expression remained unreadable. "Mrs. Ravello," he said quietly, testing the words. Elena couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Polite applause from the witnesses. The minister closing his book. Victor stepping forward with papers that needed signing, marriage license, legal documents, the bureaucratic machinery that would bind her to this man in the eyes of the law. Elena signed her name in a daze, watched Dominic's signature appear next to hers, bold and confident. And just like that, it was done. She was married. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, because apparently even sham weddings required proper pageantry. Elena found herself seated at a head table, Dominic to her right, while strangers toasted their union with champagne that probably cost more per bottle than her monthly salary used to be. "Eat something," Dominic said. First words he'd spoken to her since the ceremony. "You're pale." Elena looked at the plate of food in front of her. Elegant, expensive, utterly unappetizing. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway. You'll need your strength." The words carried an edge that made her stomach clench. She forced down a few bites of something that might have been chicken, might have been rubber. It all tasted the same. Around them, conversation flowed. Business associates offering congratulations that sounded more like negotiations. Society women air-kissing and assessing Elena like she was a curiosity at a museum. Everyone performing their roles with practiced ease. Elena was the only one drowning. "You'll get used to it," Dominic said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Will I?" "You don't have a choice." Elena turned to look at him properly for the first time since the ceremony. Up close, she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his eyes missed nothing. This close, he was less a concept and more a man, flesh and blood and breath, a man who'd killed someone while she watched. "Why did you call off the search?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "At the church. You told them to stop looking for me." "Why?" Dominic's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, that she'd ask. "You want honesty?" "I think I'm owed that much." He studied her for a long moment, then reached for his wine glass. Took a slow sip, set it down with precision. "Because hunting you was inefficient. You'd already seen everything. Killing you at that point would have raised more questions than it answered, and I had the sense you were smart enough to stay quiet. So you gambled on my fear." "I gambled on your survival instinct, which appears to have been correct." His gaze moved over her face, analytical. "You chose this over disappearing. That tells me you value what you have here more than the promise of freedom somewhere else." "I chose not to abandon my mother." "Same thing." Elena's hands clenched in her lap. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're drowning in debt from medical bills you couldn't afford. I know you work 3 jobs and still can't keep your head above water. I know your father died 2 years ago, and your mother has early onset Alzheimer's. I know you're 26, you teach art at a public school where half your students are failing, and you haven't had a relationship that lasted longer than 3 months since college." Dominic's voice remained conversational, reciting facts like a grocery list. "I know you're alone, desperate, and out of options. That's why you're here. That's why you said yes." The casual invasion of her privacy should have made her angry. Instead, Elena just felt tired. "You had me investigated." "Of course, I don't make investments without research." He turned back to the reception, dismissing her. You're not the only one taking a risk here, Elena. The difference is I've mitigated mine. Is that what I am? An investment? You're a solution to a problem. Try not to become a different problem, and we'll get along fine. The words landed like slaps. Elena swallowed the hurt, the anger, all of it. What had she expected? Romance? Kindness? This was a transaction. He told her that from the start. She was an asset now, property, a legal shield wearing a wedding dress. The reception dragged on for hours. Elena smiled when required, accepted congratulations from strangers, played the part of blushing bride while dying inside. Dominic remained at her side, the picture of an attentive husband, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like control. Finally, mercifully, it ended. "Time to go," Dominic said, helping her stand. His hand remained on her back as he guided her through the crowd, accepting final well wishes until they reached the car waiting in the circular drive. Not the car that had brought her here. Something else. A sleek black vehicle that probably cost more than Elena's entire education. Dominic held the door open. Elena slid inside, the leather seat soft as butter. He followed, and the driver pulled away from the estate without needing instruction. They drove in silence through the city. Elena watched the streets pass, familiar landmarks taking on new meaning now that her entire life had changed. The nursing home where her mother lived, its windows dark. The school where she used to teach, empty on a Saturday. The restaurant where she'd waited tables. Someone else doing that job now. Her old life, already fading like a dream. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "Home." The word carried weight she wasn't ready to unpack. 20 minutes later, the car turned into a gated driveway. The gates opened automatically, closing behind them with a finality that made Elena's chest tight. They drove up a winding path through landscaped grounds, and then the house appeared. Except it wasn't a house. It was an estate. Modern architecture combined with classical elements, all glass and stone and careful design. Lights glowed warm in the windows. Security cameras tracked their approach. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. "This is where you live." Elena couldn't keep the shock from her voice. "Where we live," Dominic corrected. "You'll have your own wing. Catherine will show you around tomorrow." The driver opened Elena's door. She stepped out onto paved stones, her heels clicking, the night air cool against her skin. Dominic came around the car, placed his hand on her back again, apparently his preferred method of directing her, and guided her to the entrance. The front door opened before they reached it. Catherine stood there, wearing a kind smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ravello." Mrs. Ravello. The name still didn't feel real. Inside was more stunning architecture, more expensive everything, marble floors, art that probably belonged in museums, furniture that screamed old money and new power combined. It was beautiful, impersonal, like a hotel designed by someone with unlimited funds and no soul. "Your suite is upstairs," Catherine said. "I've had your things brought over and unpacked. If you need anything at all, just—" "I'll show her," Dominic interrupted. His hand remained steady on Elena's back. "Thank you, Catherine." The older woman nodded, withdrew, leaving them alone in the cavernous entryway. Dominic led Elena up a sweeping staircase, down a hallway lined with more art, to a set of double doors at the far end. He pushed them open, gestured for her to enter. The suite beyond was larger than her entire former apartment. Bedroom with a king-sized bed that could sleep 4. Sitting area with a fireplace. Walk-in closet already filled with clothes she'd never owned. Someone had gone shopping for her, apparently. Bathroom done in white marble and gold fixtures. A beautiful prison. "Your space," Dominic said. "You won't be disturbed here. My rooms are in the other wing." Elena turned to face him. "So we really are. This really is just business. I told you it would be. And if I want to leave? Go see my mother, go outside, go anywhere. You're free to move about the property. If you want to leave the grounds, you'll need security with you, for your protection." "You mean for surveillance?" Dominic's expression hardened slightly. "I mean for your protection. You're my wife now, Elena. That makes you a target for my enemies. Or did you think this arrangement came without complications?" She hadn't thought about it at all, had been too overwhelmed by everything else. But of course, being married to someone like Dominic meant inheriting his enemies. The people who wanted to hurt him would see her as leverage. She'd traded one kind of danger for another. "How many enemies?" she asked. "Enough that you don't leave this house without security. Enough that you follow the protocols Catherine will teach you. Enough that you take this seriously." He moved closer, and Elena fought the urge to back away. "I chose to protect you, Elena. Don't make me regret that choice by being careless. Protect me." "Is that what this is?" "Yes." The word was flat, final. "Whether you believe it or not." They stood there, two strangers bound by law and circumstances neither had wanted, and Elena felt the full weight of what she'd agreed to settling on her shoulders. "I should let you rest," Dominic said, stepping back. "Tomorrow, Catherine will orient you to the household. You'll meet the staff, learn the security protocols, get settled. If you need anything tonight, there's a phone by the bed. Press 0 for the main house line." "Will you?" Elena stopped herself, unsure what she was even asking. "Will I what?" "Nothing. Never mind." Dominic studied her with those storm cloud eyes, and for just a moment, something almost like regret crossed his features. "This isn't what you wanted. I understand that. But it's what we have. We can make it work, or we can make it hell. Your choice." Then he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him, leaving Elena alone in her beautiful prison. She stood in the center of the room, still wearing her wedding dress, and tried to process everything. This morning, she'd been Elena Moore, struggling art teacher with more debt than hope. Tonight, she was Elena Ravello, wife to a crime lord, living in a mansion, protected and imprisoned in equal measure. Nothing made sense. Everything had changed, and she had no idea if she'd just saved her life or destroyed it completely. Slowly, mechanically, Elena removed the wedding dress, hung it in the closet among clothes that weren't hers, and found a nightgown in a drawer. She washed her face in the marble bathroom, avoiding her reflection, climbed into the enormous bed that smelled of expensive fabric softener and nothing else. The sheets were silk, the mattress perfect, but Elena had never felt more uncomfortable. She stared at the ceiling, at the subtle crown molding and the chandelier that probably cost more than a car, and tried not to cry. Failed. The tears came quietly, rolling down her temples into her hair, her body shaking with silent sobs. She'd survived. She'd saved her mother's care. She'd eliminated her debt. By any practical measure, she'd won. So why did she feel like she'd lost everything that mattered? Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. Her wedding night. She was supposed to be with her husband, supposed to be celebrating, supposed to be starting a new chapter of her life. Instead, she was alone in a stranger's house, crying into silk pillows, married to a man who'd killed someone in front of her and called it business. Elena cried until she had nothing left, until exhaustion finally dragged her under. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was a question she had no answer for. What had she become? And more terrifying, what would she become tomorrow and the day after, living in this house with this man in this world she didn't understand? Only time would tell. And Elena had the terrible certainty that time was the one thing she couldn't outrun anymore. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of complete disorientation before memory crashed back. The wedding, the mansion, Dominic Ravello's hand on her back, guiding her like property he'd just acquired. She was married. The platinum band on her finger caught the light, undeniable proof that yesterday hadn't been a nightmare. Elena stared at it, this circle of metal that had transformed her from invisible to owned in a single ceremony. A soft knock at the door made her sit up, pulling the silk sheets to her chest. "Yes?" Catherine entered carrying a tray with coffee and what looked like actual breakfast, not the microwave nonsense Elena had survived on for years, but real food arranged artfully on china. "Good morning, Mrs. Ravello. I thought you might be hungry." The name still jarred. "Thank you. And please, just Elena." "As you wish." Catherine set the tray on the bedside table, then moved to the windows, adjusting the curtains to let in more light. "Mr. Ravello asked me to help you settle in today. When you're ready, I'll give you a tour of the house and go over the household protocols." Protocols. Like she was entering the military instead of a marriage. "Where is he, Dominic?" He left for the office around 6. He keeps early hours. Catherine's tone suggested this was normal, expected. He won't return until evening. Relief and something else, disappointment maybe, though Elena couldn't explain why, washed through her. So I'm just supposed to what? Wait here? You're supposed to learn how to navigate your new life. Catherine's voice gentled slightly. I know this is overwhelming, but the sooner you understand how things work, the easier it will be. Elena wanted to argue that nothing about this would ever be easy, but what was the point? She nodded, accepted the coffee Catherine poured, and tried to pretend the scrambled eggs didn't taste like ashes in her mouth. An hour later, dressed in clothes from the closet that fit perfectly, because of course Dominic's people had gotten her measurements somehow, Elena followed Catherine through the mansion. Each room was more impressive than the last. Library with floor-to-ceiling books and leather furniture. Formal dining room that could seat 20. A gym that looked like something from a luxury hotel. An indoor pool with windows overlooking the grounds. The staff knows you're off limits for conversation about Mr. Ravello's business, Catherine explained as they walked. They're loyal, well-paid, and discreet. But you should still be careful what you say around them. In this house, trust is earned, not given. How many staff are there? 8 regular household employees, plus security, which rotates. You'll recognize the security team by their earpieces and the way they position themselves. They're not here to spy on you, Elena. They're here to keep you safe. From what exactly? Catherine stopped walking, turned to face her. From people who would use you to hurt Dominic. From rival organizations who would love to get their hands on his wife. From threats you don't even know exist yet. She paused. Your life changed the moment you witnessed that execution. Marrying Dominic didn't create the danger. It just gave you protection from it. The words echoed what Dominic had said, but they didn't make Elena feel any safer. And if I want to leave? Visit my mother? You can, but you'll need security with you. Marco will be your primary driver and bodyguard. He's one of Dominic's most trusted men. The one who brought me the money? Yes. He'll take you anywhere you need to go, but you need to give him advance notice. No spontaneous trips. No leaving the grounds without telling someone. These aren't arbitrary rules, Elena. They're what keep you alive. The tour continued. Catherine showed her Dominic's wing of the house. Doors she was welcome to knock on, but shouldn't enter uninvited. His office, strictly off limits. The kitchen, where Elena was welcome any time, but where staff would prepare her meals if she requested. A sunroom filled with plants that someone clearly tended with devotion. This is beautiful, Elena said, trailing her fingers over an orchid's delicate petals. Dominic's mother designed this room before she passed. He maintains it in her memory. Catherine's expression softened. She loved growing things. Said it reminded her that not everything in life had to be hard. The glimpse of humanity behind Dominic's cold exterior unsettled Elena more than his ruthlessness had. It was easier to hate a monster than to recognize a person. They ended the tour in what Catherine called the security office, a room filled with monitors showing every angle of the property. A man Elena didn't recognize sat watching the screens with focused attention. Mrs. Ravello, this is Thomas. He manages daytime security. Thomas stood, nodded respectfully. Ma'am, if you need anything, if you see anything concerning, you let me or any of the security team know immediately. What kind of concerning things? Unfamiliar vehicles near the property, people watching the house, anyone approaching you in public who seems off. We take every threat seriously, no matter how small. Elena's stomach clenched. Has there been threats already? Against me? Thomas glanced at Catherine, who gave a slight nod. Nothing specific, but word travels fast in certain circles. People know about the marriage. That makes you interesting. We're just being cautious. Cautious. Right. Because living under constant surveillance was just normal married life. The rest of the day passed in a blur of information and protocols Elena struggled to absorb. How to contact security in an emergency. Which exits were safe versus which ones triggered silent alarms. The code words to use if she was in danger but couldn't speak freely. It was like learning to live in a war zone disguised as a mansion. By evening, Elena's head throbbed and her nerves were frayed. She retreated to her suite, intent on hiding until the world made sense again. But at 7 o'clock, Catherine knocked with a message. Mr. Ravello requests your presence at dinner, 8 o'clock in the formal dining room. Requests, like she had a choice. Elena changed into one of the dresses from her new wardrobe, deep blue, elegant but not flashy, and made her way downstairs at precisely 8. The dining room was lit with soft candlelight, the table set for two at one end, close enough to be intimate but far enough to maintain distance. Dominic was already there, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey, still wearing his suit from the day, though he'd loosened his tie. He turned when she entered, his gaze moving over her in that assessing way she was beginning to recognize. You look well rested, he said. I slept fine, thank you. The lie came easily. She'd barely slept at all, had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling. Sit, please. He gestured to the table, waited until she'd settled before taking his own seat. Almost immediately, staff appeared with the first course, some kind of soup that probably had a fancy French name. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the clink of silverware against china. Elena's nerves wound tighter with each passing second. Catherine showed you the house? Dominic asked finally. Yes, it's very comprehensive. That's one word for it. A hint of amusement colored his tone. I imagine the security protocols seemed excessive. They seemed terrifying. Dominic set down his spoon, regarded her steadily. They're necessary. I need you to understand that, Elena. The people in my world don't play by normal rules. They see weakness, and they exploit it. You're a potential weakness now. Because I'm your wife. Because you matter to me on paper. Whether you actually matter is irrelevant. The perception is what's dangerous. He paused. That's why you follow the protocols, why you don't take risks, why you trust the security I've provided. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. This isn't a life. It's a prison with better furniture. It's survival. There's a difference. Is there? She met his gaze, surprised by her own boldness. You talk about protection, but I'm not free. You talk about keeping me safe, but I can't make a single decision without approval. How is that different from captivity? Dominic's expression hardened. You want to know the difference? I'll show you. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then turned it to face her. The screen showed a photograph. A woman, maybe 30, beaten so badly her face was barely recognizable. Elena's stomach turned. Sofia Marchetti, Dominic said quietly. Wife of one of my competitors. She decided she didn't need security, that the protocols were too restrictive. She went shopping alone. 3 weeks ago, someone grabbed her off the street. They sent her back in pieces over the course of 5 days. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my! Her husband got the message, paid what he owed, fell in line. But Sophia's dead because she thought she knew better than the people trying to protect her. Dominic pulled the phone back, pocketed it. That's the difference between prison and protection. Prison is about control. Protection is about keeping you alive. Don't confuse the two. The soup tasted like bile now. Elena pushed her bowl away, fighting nausea. Why are you showing me this? Because you need to understand what's at stake. This isn't a game, Elena. The world you're in now, people die for much less than you've already seen. I need to know you'll take this seriously. I never asked for any of this. No. But you chose it when you could have chosen differently. So now you live with the consequences. We both do. He signaled for the staff to bring the next course. Tell me about your mother. How is she? The subject change gave Elena whiplash. What? Your mother. You were worried about her care. I had the nursing home send over her latest medical reports. The Alzheimer's is progressing, but slowly. She's comfortable. Elena stared at him, unable to reconcile the man who'd just shown her brutal images with the one asking about her mother's health. You read her medical files. I take care of what's mine. That includes your family. Dominic's tone suggested this was obvious. If you want to visit her, Marco can take you tomorrow, though I'd recommend waiting a few days until the news of our marriage has circulated. There will be press interest. Press interest? Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course, because marrying you makes me newsworthy. It makes you a target for speculation. The media loves a story, and the mysterious new wife of Dominic Ravello will generate headlines. We'll need to control the narrative. How do we do that? Tomorrow, my publicist will brief you. We'll release an official statement, probably do one carefully controlled interview. You'll need to learn what you can and can't say. He paused. I know this is a lot, but the sooner you adapt, the easier it gets. You keep saying that. Everyone keeps saying that. But nothing about this feels like it will ever be easy. Dominic studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. You're right. It won't be. But you're stronger than you think, Elena. You wouldn't have survived this long otherwise. You don't know anything about my strength. Don't I? He leaned back in his chair. You worked 3 jobs to keep your head above water. You sacrificed your own life to care for your mother. You didn't crumble when I gave you impossible choices. You evaluated your options and made a strategic decision. That's not weakness. That's survival instinct. The unexpected praise caught Elena off guard. She'd expected coldness, distance, the same transactional approach he'd shown at the wedding, not this strange mixture of ruthlessness and observation. Why did you really spare me? The question emerged before she could stop it. The real reason, not the efficiency excuse. Dominic's fingers drummed once against the table, a rare tell that suggested she'd surprised him. You want the truth? I think I've earned it. He considered this, then nodded slowly. Because when I looked at you in that parking lot, terrified and soaking wet, I saw someone who understood exactly how bad their situation was and still tried to run. Not fight. Not negotiate. Run. That's smart. That's someone who assesses threats and acts accordingly. His gaze held hers. And because when Victor investigated you, I realized killing you would be punishing someone for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You weren't the enemy. You were just unlucky. I'm ruthless, Elena, but I'm not indiscriminate. So you married me instead. How merciful. I gave you a way to survive that let you keep the things you cared about. Your mother's care, your dignity, your life. Yes, there are strings attached, but you're alive and so is everyone you love. In my world, that's mercy. Elena wanted to argue, to rage against the casual way he'd upended her entire existence. But what could she say that would change anything? This was her reality now. The question was whether she'd drown in it or learn to swim. The rest of dinner passed with careful conversation about neutral topics. The house. The staff. Small details about schedules and expectations. Dominic was surprisingly easy to talk to when he wasn't being terrifying, his intelligence evident in the way he analyzed topics, found connections she'd missed. By the time dessert arrived, something chocolate and decadent, Elena felt the strangest sense of normalcy, like they were just 2 people having dinner, not a crime lord and his legally acquired wife. There's something we need to discuss, Dominic said as they finished. We're expected at a charity gala next month. It will be your first public appearance as my wife. High profile, lots of scrutiny. Elena's stomach dropped. Can I just... No, you're my wife. That comes with social obligations. This particular event is important for business relationships. You'll need to be there. Doing what, exactly? Looking beautiful, being charming, not saying anything that could be used against me. He said it matter-of-factly, like these were simple requirements. Catherine will help you prepare. It's not as daunting as it sounds. Easy for you to say. You've done this before. I have, and I'll be right beside you the entire time. Something shifted in his expression. I won't throw you into the deep end alone, Elena. Whatever else this marriage is, you're under my protection. That means something. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. Dominic glanced at it, and his entire demeanor changed, shoulders tensing, jaw tightening, eyes going cold. I need to take this. He stood, already moving toward the door. You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be long. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone at the table with half-eaten dessert and more questions than answers. She returned to her suite, changed into nightwear, and stood at the window looking out over the grounds. Security lights illuminated the gardens, and she could see shadows moving, the guards doing their rounds, keeping watch over their employer's newest acquisition. Elena pressed her palm against the cool glass and wondered what Dominic was dealing with that had turned him from almost human to completely cold in seconds. Wondered what kind of call came at 9 p.m. that required that level of response. Wondered if she'd ever understand the world she'd married into. A soft buzz from her phone, one of the new ones, given to her by Catherine with security features she didn't fully understand. A text from an unknown number. "Everything okay?" Catherine said to check in. Marco Elena stared at the message. Even her bodyguard was monitoring her now. But there was something oddly comforting about it too. Someone making sure she was all right, even if it was part of their job. "Fine. Just adjusting," she typed back. "Takes time. You're doing good." The unexpected kindness made her throat tight. She set the phone down, crawled into bed, and tried not to think about how strange it was to find comfort in a text from her guard while her husband conducted mysterious business elsewhere in the house. Sleep came easier that night, exhaustion finally winning over anxiety. But her dreams were troubled. Parking lots and gunshots and storm cloud eyes watching her from the darkness. She woke sometime after midnight to the sound of raised voices. Elena sat up, disoriented, trying to place the sound. It was coming from somewhere downstairs, muffled but clearly angry. Moving quietly, she crept to her door, opened it a crack. The voices were clearer now, Dominic and someone else, their argument carrying up the stairs. "Can't keep making excuses for him, Dom. He's a liability. He's family. That means something. Family got Sophia killed. Family is the reason we have problems in the first place." The other voice was male, older, frustrated. "You need to make a decision before he makes it for you." "I'm handling it." "The way you handled Marcus? Look where that got us. A witness, a forced marriage, complications we don't need." Silence. Then Dominic's voice so cold it made Elena shiver. "Careful, Uncle. That forced marriage is the reason we still have legal protection on 3 major contracts. That complication has kept us ahead of federal investigation. Show some respect." "Respect? For some girl you picked up in a parking lot? She's a civilian, Dominic. She doesn't belong in this world." "She's my wife. That's all you need to know." "Now are we done? Because I have actual problems to solve, and relitigating my marriage isn't one of them." More silence, then footsteps moving away. A door slamming. Elena quickly retreated from her door, climbed back into bed, heart pounding. She'd just heard something she wasn't supposed to hear. Learned that Dominic had family who questioned his decisions. That the marriage had business implications beyond just protection. That she was seen as an outsider, which she supposed she was. But what struck her most was the way Dominic had defended her. Not because he cared, he'd made it clear this was business. But because she was his, and in his world, that apparently meant something. Elena lay awake for a long time after that, processing what she'd heard, trying to understand the complex web she'd become part of. She'd thought the marriage was simple, protection in exchange for silence. But nothing in Dominic's world was simple, and she was beginning to realize just how deep the waters ran. Morning came too soon. Catherine appeared with breakfast and the announcement that Dominic had left early for meetings, wouldn't return until late. Elena spent the day with the publicist, a sharp woman named Adriana who coached her on exactly what to say if asked about the marriage. "You fell in love quickly. It was a private ceremony because you both value privacy. You're adjusting to married life, but very happy. Never comment on his business. If pressed, smile and redirect." Adriana rattled off instructions like a general planning battle strategy. By evening, Elena's head throbbed with information overload. She declined dinner, ordered a tray to her room, and was picking at a salad when another knock came. "Come in," she called, expecting Catherine. Dominic entered instead, still in his suit, but looking tired in a way she hadn't seen before. "May I?" Elena nodded, too surprised to speak. He sat in one of the chairs by the fireplace, ran a hand through his hair. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not preparing you better. Adriana said today was rough. That's on me." He leaned back, studied her. "This would be easier if you'd grown up in this world, but you didn't, and I keep forgetting that. Your uncle doesn't think I belong here." The words escaped before Elena could stop them. Dominic's expression sharpened. "You heard that?" "Some of it. Last night. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop." My uncle is protective and old-fashioned. He'll come around. Dominic's tone suggested the matter wasn't up for debate. What else did you hear? Elena hesitated, then decided honesty was safer than half-truths. That the marriage has business benefits you didn't mention. That I'm a complication. That someone named Sofia was killed because of family. Sofia Marchetti, the woman I showed you the photo of. Her husband's cousin betrayed them to rivals. Family isn't always protection. Sometimes it's your weakest point. He paused. And yes, the marriage has benefits beyond your silence. But those benefits serve us both. You're protected. I maintain certain legal advantages. It's symbiotic. You could have told me. Would it have changed your answer? Elena considered this. No? Then it wasn't relevant. He stood, moved toward the door, then paused. We leave for the coast in 3 days. A week at my property there. Honeymoon for appearances. Honeymoon. Elena's voice was flat. You're joking. The media expects it. Society expects it. And frankly, we could both use time away from the city to adjust to this arrangement without constant scrutiny. He met her eyes. Separate bedrooms, same as here, but we need to be seen together, need to look like a couple in love. Can you manage that? Could she? Pretend to be in love with a man who'd bought her like property? Play the role of devoted wife when this whole thing was a legal shield? Do I have a choice? She asked quietly. You always have choices, Elena. They're just not always the ones you want. He opened the door, then looked back one final time. Pack light. The coast is casual. Then he was gone again, leaving Elena alone with the knowledge that in 3 days she'd be playing honeymoon with a stranger who'd become her husband. And somewhere in the dangerous undercurrents of their arrangement, she'd have to figure out how to survive not just the threats from outside, but the ones growing from within. The slow, insidious danger of forgetting this was all pretend. The coastal property turned out to be a villa perched on cliffs overlooking the Mediterranean, all white stone and blue shutters and views that belonged in travel magazines. Elena stood on the terrace their first evening there, watching the sun sink into the sea, and felt the same cognitive dissonance that had plagued her since the wedding. This place was paradise. Her life was a cage. Both things were somehow true at once. Beautiful, isn't it? Dominic's voice came from behind her. He'd changed from his travel clothes into linen pants and a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. More relaxed than she'd ever seen him, though his eyes still held that constant vigilance. It's stunning, Elena admitted. How long have you owned it? 5 years. I come here when I need to think, when the city gets too loud. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body in the cooling evening air. We have the place to ourselves except for minimal staff. Security is handled remotely. It's as private as anywhere can be. Private. The word carried implications Elena wasn't ready to examine. You said separate bedrooms. I did, and I meant it. Dominic gestured back toward the villa. Your suite is on the east side, mine's west. There's plenty of space between us. The relief should have been absolute, but Elena found herself oddly unsettled by his quick assurance, which was ridiculous. She didn't want to share a bedroom with him, didn't want any intimacy with the man who'd forced her into this marriage. The fact that a small, traitorous part of her had wondered what it would be like, that was just her mind playing tricks, trying to make sense of an impossible situation. The staff laid out dinner on the patio, Dominic continued, unless you'd prefer to eat alone? 3 days of traveling together. Private jet, car service, all of it conducted with polite distance and minimal conversation. They'd mastered the art of occupying the same space while remaining essentially alone. But something about this place, the isolation and the sunset and the sound of waves below, made maintaining that distance feel forced. Dinner together is fine, Elena said. They ate at a table set for 2, candles flickering in the breeze, the food simple but perfect. Fresh fish, local vegetables. Wine that probably cost more than Elena used to make in a month. Dominic was different here, she noticed. Less guarded. The hard edges that defined him in the city seemed softened by salt air and distance from his empire. Tell me something about yourself, he said, refilling her wine glass. Something that wasn't in the background check. Elena blinked at the unexpected request. Like what? Anything. I know the facts of your life, but facts aren't the same as knowing someone. He leaned back, studying her in that way that made her feel simultaneously seen and exposed. What made you want to teach art? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years, had cared about the reasons behind her choices. My father, she said quietly. He was a carpenter. Not professionally, he worked construction. But on weekends, he'd build things, beautiful things, furniture, cabinets, these intricate wooden puzzles. He said creating something from nothing was the closest humans got to magic. Dominic listened without interrupting, his attention absolute. When he got sick, when we knew he was dying, he made me promise I'd keep creating. Said the world had enough people who just consumed and too few who made beauty. Elena's throat tightened at the memory. Teaching art felt like keeping that promise. Even if my students never become artists, they learn to see beauty, to make things with their hands. It mattered to him, so it matters to me. Past tense, Dominic observed. You taught art. Do you plan to go back? Elena hadn't thought about it. The school had been told she'd resigned for personal reasons, the story carefully crafted by Dominic's people. Going back meant questions she couldn't answer, scrutiny she couldn't handle. I don't know if I can. Why not? Because I'm your wife now. Because showing up at a public school would create exactly the kind of attention you said we're trying to avoid. The frustration in her voice surprised her. That life is gone, Dominic. You know that. It doesn't have to be. He set down his wine glass. If teaching matters to you, we'll find a way. Private students, maybe. Or you could teach at one of the charter schools my foundation funds, places with better security where your presence wouldn't raise eyebrows. Your foundation funds charter schools? Among other things, hospitals, community centers, youth programs. He said it casually, like it was unremarkable. Money is a tool, Elena. It can destroy or it can build. I prefer doing both. The glimpse into his world beyond violence and crime unsettled her more than the ruthlessness had. It was easier to hate a monster, harder to reconcile that monster with someone who funded schools and spoke about creation mattering. What about you? Elena asked, deflecting. What made you choose this life? Dominic's expression shuddered slightly. I didn't choose it. I was born into it. My father built an empire, and I inherited the responsibility of maintaining it. You could have walked away. Could I? His smile was bitter. You think men like me get to choose normal lives? I was 12 when I watched my father eliminate a traitor. 14 when I understood that everything we had was built on blood and strategy. By the time I was old enough to question it, I was already too deep to leave. He paused. This is the only life I know, Elena. The only one I'm good at. I don't believe that. You should. His gaze held hers. I'm a killer. That's not metaphor or exaggeration. I've ended lives because they threatened what's mine. I've made decisions that destroyed families. The charity work, the legitimate businesses, the foundations. Those don't erase what I am. Then why do them? Because my mother asked me to. The admission came quietly. Before she died, she made me promise that I'd use our resources for something beyond just accumulating power. Said there was already too much darkness in our family, and she needed to know some light would survive her. His jaw tightened. So I keep that promise. But it doesn't make me good, Elena, just less completely evil. The raw honesty in his words created an intimacy Elena hadn't expected, didn't want, couldn't quite resist. She saw him suddenly not as the terrifying figure who'd upended her life, but as someone equally trapped by circumstances and choices that had been made long before either of them had any say. I think you're more complicated than you pretend to be, she said softly. Complicated doesn't mean redeemable. But something in his expression had shifted, walls lowering incrementally. They finished dinner in more comfortable silence, the tension between them changing quality. Less adversarial, more uncertain, like they were both trying to figure out what they were to each other beyond the legal fiction of marriage. After dinner, Dominic suggested a walk along the cliff path. Elena agreed, and they descended steps carved into stone, following a trail lit by solar lanterns. The sea crashed against rocks below, violent and beautiful. Above them, stars emerged as the last light faded. "So quiet here," Elena said, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. "I'd forgotten what quiet sounds like." Dominic shrugged out of his jacket, draped it over her shoulders without asking. The gesture was automatic, almost protective, and Elena found herself pulling the fabric closer, breathing in the scent of expensive cologne and something underneath that was just him. "That's why I come here," he said. "In the city there's always noise, always problems demanding attention. Here I can think." "What do you think about?" "How to keep the empire running, which threats are real and which are posturing, whether the choices I'm making will protect my people or get them killed." He glanced at her. "And lately, how to make this arrangement work for both of us instead of just me." The admission surprised her. "You think about that?" "You're not what I expected," Dominic said. "I thought you'd be terrified into submission, compliant and quiet and grateful just to be alive. But you're not. You push back, you question. You're stronger than I gave you credit for." "I don't feel strong." "Strength isn't the absence of fear, it's functioning despite it." They'd reached a lookout point and Dominic stopped, turned to face the sea. "You're surviving an impossible situation with more grace than most people could manage. That's strength." Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They stood together watching waves, and for the first time since the wedding, Elena felt something like peace. The moment shattered with the sound of an explosion. Dominic reacted instantly, grabbing Elena and yanking her down behind the stone wall of the lookout. "Stay low," he ordered, his entire demeanor transformed from contemplative to lethal in a heartbeat. "What's happening?" Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "We're under attack." He pulled a gun from somewhere, his ankle, she realized he'd been armed the whole time, and peered over the wall toward the villa. Flames licked up from what had been the garage. "They hit the security station first. Smart." "Who? Who's attacking us?" "Does it matter?" Dominic's voice was cold, focused. He pulled out his phone, cursed. "They're jamming communications. We can't call for backup." Another explosion rocked the cliff. Closer this time. Elena screamed, pressing herself against the stone. "We need to move," Dominic said. "There's a boathouse at the base of the cliff. If we can reach it—" Gunfire erupted from the direction of the villa. Multiple shooters, their weapons creating a staccato rhythm that echoed off stone. Dominic grabbed Elena's hand. "Run! Now!" They ran, stumbling down the dark path, the solar lanterns suddenly seeming woefully inadequate. Behind them, more gunfire. Shouts in Italian, footsteps pounding. Elena's heel caught on uneven stone. She would have fallen if Dominic hadn't caught her, his arm banding around her waist, hauling her upright. "Keep moving." "I can't. My shoes." He didn't slow, just kept dragging her forward, practically carrying her. They rounded a corner and Dominic pulled her into a shallow alcove in the cliff face, pressing her against the stone with his body as a shield. "Don't move. Don't breathe loud." His voice was barely a whisper against her ear. Footsteps approached. Two men, speaking rapid Italian that Elena couldn't follow. They passed within feet of the alcove, and Elena felt Dominic's entire body coil with tension, his hand tightening on the gun. The men kept going. Dominic waited 30 seconds more before pulling back slightly. "Okay, we move fast and quiet. The boathouse is 5 minutes down if we—" A figure emerged from the darkness ahead. Tall, armed, wearing tactical gear. His gun swung toward them. Dominic moved faster than Elena could track, pushing her behind him and firing in one fluid motion. The shot was thunderously loud in the enclosed space. The man dropped. "Jesus," Elena breathed, her whole body shaking. "Can you swim?" Dominic asked, already moving forward, checking the dead man's weapons. "What? Can you swim? Yes or no?" He grabbed the man's radio, listened for a moment, then smashed it against the rocks. "Yes, but then we're going in the water. Boathouse is compromised." That radio chatter was them clearing it. He holstered his gun, took Elena's hand again. "We jump from the lowest point. Current will carry us along the coast. There's a cove about a mile south, hidden beach. We can hide there until sunrise." "You want me to jump off a cliff into the ocean in the dark?" Elena's voice climbed toward hysteria. "I want you to survive the night. This is how we do that. His grip on her hand tightened. Trust me. Trust. What a word to use now, when everything was fire and bullets and fear. But what choice did she have? They ran again, this time Dominic leading them off the path, scrambling down loose rocks toward the cliff edge. Elena could hear the ocean below, crashing against rocks, and terror clawed at her throat. More shouts behind them. A bullet sparked off stone near Elena's head. She yelped, stumbled, and Dominic caught her. When we hit the water, swim away from the cliff, he said rapidly. Let the current take you, but stay on the surface. I'll find you. Do you understand? Dominic, do you understand? His eyes bored into hers, fierce and certain and absolutely terrifying in their intensity. Yes. Good. Now jump. He didn't give her time to think, just wrapped an arm around her waist and launched them both off the cliff. The fall seemed to last forever. Wind rushing past, darkness absolute. Elena's scream torn from her throat and swallowed by the void. Then impact, the water hitting like concrete, driving the air from her lungs. Cold shocked through her system, salt stinging her eyes and nose. She kicked toward the surface, broke through gasping and choking. The current was strong, pulling her away from the cliff where gunfire still echoed. Where was Dominic? She couldn't see anything in the darkness. Dominic! Her shout was weak, pathetic against the sound of waves. Strong arms grabbed her from behind. I've got you. Stop fighting, and let me pull you. Relief flooded through Elena so intensely it nearly made her sob. She let herself go limp, let Dominic tow her through the water. His swimming was powerful, confident, cutting through the current with purpose. Time lost meaning, could have been 5 minutes or 50. Elena's muscles burned, cold seeped into her bones, and she'd never been more terrified in her life. But Dominic's grip never wavered, his body solid and sure, even as waves tried to tear them apart. Finally, blessedly, she felt his feet touch bottom. He hauled her upright, half carrying her through shallow water onto a small beach enclosed by towering rocks. They collapsed together on the sand, both breathing hard. Elena's teeth chattered so violently she could barely speak. Will they find us? Not tonight. This beach isn't accessible from land. We're safe until dawn. Dominic sat up, started stripping off his soaked shirt. We need to get you out of those wet clothes. Hypothermia is a real risk. I'm fine. But she wasn't. She was shaking uncontrollably, her dress plastered to her skin, every part of her ice cold. Elena, his voice was firm, your lips are blue. Take off the dress or I'll do it for you. The command in his tone left no room for argument. With numb, fumbling fingers, Elena managed to unzip the dress, let it fall. Dominic had already shed his shirt and pants, stood there in just his boxer briefs, completely unself-conscious. Come here. He sat with his back against a large rock sheltered from the wind, gestured for her to sit between his legs. What are you? Body heat, it's all we have. When she hesitated, his jaw tightened. I just jumped off a cliff to save your life. You think I'm going to hurt you now? Get over here. Elena moved on instinct and exhaustion, settling against him. Immediately, his arms came around her, pulling her back against his chest. He was warmer than she expected, solid muscle and steady heartbeat, and despite everything, despite the insanity of being half naked on a beach with a man who'd killed someone tonight, Elena felt safer than she had in weeks. What happened? She asked, her voice small. Who were they? Rivals. Someone found out about the honeymoon, saw an opportunity. His arms tightened fractionally. I should have anticipated it, should have brought more security. This is my fault. How is someone trying to kill us your fault? Because I made enemies, because I brought you into this world, because... He stopped, exhaled slowly. Because you could have died tonight, Elena, and that would have been on me. The raw guilt in his voice was unexpected, genuine. Elena turned her head slightly, could see his jaw and profile, tight with self-recrimination. But I didn't die. You saved me. I endangered you in the first place. You didn't pull that trigger in the parking lot while I was watching. That just happened. Everything after has been you trying to manage the consequences. She reached up, touched his face without thinking. Stop taking responsibility for things you can't control. Dominic looked at her then, really looked, and Elena saw something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. Want, maybe. or recognition. The acknowledgement that somewhere between the forced marriage and jumping off cliffs, something had shifted between them. "You're shaking," he said quietly. "I'm terrified." "I know, but you jumped anyway. You trusted me." His hand came up to cover hers where it still rested against his jaw. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up, for being stronger than I expected, for—" He seemed to struggle with the words. "For being here." Elena's breath caught. They were so close, his face inches from hers, and the night had stripped away all pretense. No more business arrangement, no more careful distance, just two people who'd survived something impossible together. "Dominic," she whispered. He kissed her. Not the polite, bloodless kiss from the wedding. This was different, urgent and claiming and absolutely real. His hand cupped the back of her head, fingers threading through her wet hair, and Elena found herself kissing him back with a desperation that had nothing to do with cold and everything to do with need. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "That wasn't business," he said, voice rough. "No," Elena agreed. "It wasn't. I'm not sorry. Neither am I." They stayed like that, wrapped around each other as the night deepened and the adrenaline slowly faded. Elena should have felt vulnerable, should have been terrified of this new intimacy with a man who was still fundamentally dangerous. But instead, she felt seen, chosen. Like somewhere in the chaos, they'd stopped being strangers forced together and become something else entirely. "When the sun comes up," Dominic said eventually, "we'll hike along the coast to the nearest town. I'll make contact with Victor, get us extracted. The people who did this will be handled." Handled? Elena knew what that meant. More killing. Yes. No apology in the word. "They tried to kill my wife. There are consequences for that." My wife. The possessiveness in his tone should have rankled. Instead, it sent heat curling through Elena's chest. "And then what?" she asked. "Then we go home. Figure out what this is between us. Because it's not just business anymore, Elena. We both know that." She did know it, had known it since the moment he'd grabbed her hand on that cliff path, since he'd used his body to shield hers, since he'd jumped into darkness, holding on to her like she mattered more than his own safety. "I'm still angry at you," she said, "for forcing this marriage, for taking away my choices." "I know, but I think—" Elena paused, trying to find the right words. "I think maybe I'm starting to understand why you did it, and that scares me more than the guns did." Dominic's arms tightened around her. "Understanding me is dangerous. Everything about you is dangerous." "Yes." He pressed a kiss to her temple, gentle in a way that contradicted everything she knew about him. "But you're here anyway." They fell silent, holding each other as the stars wheeled overhead and waves washed the shore. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, emergency services responding to the fire at the villa. But here, in their hidden cove, they were alone with truth too new and fragile to examine closely. Elena dozed eventually, exhaustion overwhelming fear. When she woke in the gray pre-dawn light, Dominic was still awake, still watching, still keeping guard. His arms hadn't loosened. "Hey," she murmured. "You should have slept." "I did. Enough." He looked down at her, something soft in his expression that made her heart stutter. "How do you feel?" "Like I jumped off a cliff and survived." She sat up slowly, suddenly aware of how little clothing separated them. "We should probably—" "Yeah." But neither of them moved immediately. The moment stretched, charged with all the things they weren't saying. Then Dominic stood, offered her his hand. "There's a hiking path about 100 yards north. It'll take us to the coastal road." They dressed in their still damp clothes, Elena grimacing at the feel of salt-stiff fabric against her skin. Dominic helped her navigate the rocks to the path, his hand steady and sure. The hike took 2 hours. By the time they reached the road, Elena's feet were blistered and her legs shook with exhaustion. But Dominic flagged down the first car that passed. A local farmer who took one look at them and immediately offered assistance. Within 3 hours, they were in a safe house Victor had arranged. Clean clothes, hot food, and security that made the villa look casual. Elena showered until the hot water ran cold, washing away salt and fear and the memory of bullets sparking off stone. When she emerged, wrapped in a robe too large for her, Dominic was on the phone in the living room. His voice was cold, clipped, issuing orders that would result in violence she didn't want to imagine. He saw her, ended the call immediately. "You okay?" "Physically, yes." Elena sat on the sofa, pulled her knees to her chest. "Emotionally, I have no idea." Dominic crossed to her, crouched so they were eye level. "What we did last night." "Which part? The running for our lives or the kissing?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Both, either. I need to know you're not going to regret this when we get home." Elena considered the question seriously. Should she regret kissing her forced husband? Probably. Should she regret the way her body had responded to his touch, the way she'd felt safe despite the danger? Definitely. "I don't regret it," she said finally. "I don't know what it means, but I don't regret it." Dominic nodded slowly, something like relief crossing his features. He reached up, tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear. "I won't force anything, Elena. What happens between us from here, that's your choice." "My choice?" She almost laughed. "That's the first time you've given me one since the parking lot." "I know. And I can't undo forcing the marriage. But I can give you this. Whatever we become, if we become anything, it's because you chose it, not because you had to." The promise hung between them, fragile and significant. Elena reached out, laced her fingers through his. "Ask me something." "What?" "You said you wanted to know me beyond the facts. Ask me something that matters." Dominic seemed to consider, then asked quietly, "What are you most afraid of?" "That I'll lose myself in this world. That I'll wake up one day and not recognize who I've become." She held his gaze. "What about you? What scares Dominic Ravello?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Caring about someone enough that losing them would destroy me. That's why I've never let anyone get close. Why this marriage was supposed to stay business." His thumb traced circles on her hand. "But you're making that difficult." "Good," Elena said, surprising herself. "You should be uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable since the moment you decided my life for me." "Fair enough." He stood, pulled her up with him. "We fly home tomorrow. Tonight we rest and recover. Separate rooms like always." But when he started to leave, Elena tightened her grip on his hand. "Stay, please. Just until I fall asleep. I don't want to be alone." The vulnerability in admitting that cost her, but Dominic's expression gentled. "Okay, come on." He led her to the bedroom, pulled back the covers. Elena climbed in, and Dominic settled on top of the blankets beside her, fully clothed. His arm came around her shoulders, and she curled against him, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me, for all of it." "Always," Dominic murmured against her hair. "That's what this means now, Elena. I protect what's mine, and you're mine." The possessiveness should have bothered her. Instead, Elena felt something dangerous blooming in her chest, something that felt suspiciously like the beginning of feelings she had no business developing for a man who'd forced her into marriage. But as she drifted off to sleep in his arms, safe despite everything, Elena couldn't quite bring herself to care about should and shouldn't anymore. Sometimes survival meant adapting, and maybe, just maybe, adapting to Dominic Ravello wasn't the worst fate she could have chosen. They returned to the city 3 days later, and Elena could feel the difference in Dominic immediately. The man who'd held her through the night at the safe house had been replaced by something harder, colder, more focused. He spent the flight on encrypted calls, his voice clipped and merciless as he coordinated responses to the attack. By the time they landed, his eyes held the kind of ice that reminded Elena exactly who she'd married. The mansion felt different too. Security had tripled. Armed guards patrolled the grounds openly now, no more pretense of discretion. Catherine greeted them at the door with concern etched into her features, but Dominic waved off her questions with a terse, "We're fine. Get Elena settled. I have work to do." Then he was gone, disappearing into his office with Victor and 3 other men Elena didn't recognize, the door closing with the finality of a vault ceiling. Elena stood in the foyer, still wearing borrowed clothes from the safe house, and felt the careful connection they'd built on that beach crumbling. Whatever intimacy had sparked between them was being smothered by the reality of his world, by the violence that demanded his attention, by the empire that had first claim on who he was. "Come," Catherine said gently. "Let's get you into something comfortable. You must be exhausted." Elena let herself be led upstairs, let Catherine fuss over her like a mother hen, but her mind stayed on that closed office door and what it represented. The separation between Dominic's world and the small space he'd carved out for her. The reminder that she was protected, yes, but still fundamentally outside the machinery that ran his life. That night, she ate dinner alone. The next morning, Dominic was gone before she woke. The pattern continued for 3 days. Him vanishing into his empire, her rattling around the mansion like a ghost, the distance between them growing wider with each passing hour. On the 4th day, Elena had had enough. She found Victor in the security office, reviewing footage from the coastal attack. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his usually neutral expression. "Mrs. Ravello, is there something you need?" "I need to see my husband," Elena kept her voice steady. "Where is he?" "Mr. Ravello is in meetings. He'll be back this evening." "That's what you said yesterday. And the day before." She crossed her arms. "I'm not asking for permission, Victor. I'm telling you I need to see him. Now." Victor studied her for a long moment, then reached for his phone. A brief, quiet conversation Elena couldn't quite hear. He hung up, nodded. "He'll see you in his office. But Mrs. Ravello, he's in the middle of something delicate. Please be brief." Elena made her way to the West Wing, to the office she'd been told was off limits. She knocked once, then entered without waiting for permission. Dominic sat behind a massive desk, papers spread before him, his phone to his ear. He looked up when she entered, something flashing in his eyes. Surprise, maybe annoyance, definitely awareness. He held up one finger, finished his call, then set the phone down with careful precision. "Elena, is something wrong?" "You tell me." She closed the door behind her. "You've been avoiding me for 3 days." "I've been working. There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're running away from what happened on the coast." Dominic's jaw tightened. "I'm handling the people who tried to kill us. That takes priority." "Over talking to me? Over acknowledging that something changed between us?" Elena moved closer to his desk. "We spent a night on a beach barely clothed, Dominic. You kissed me. You held me. You said I was yours, and now you're pretending none of that happened." "I'm not pretending anything." He stood, came around the desk. "I'm dealing with the consequences of my enemies finding out about our marriage. 4 people are dead because I got careless, because I let my guard down. That can't happen again. So you're shutting me out. I'm protecting you. By pushing me away? By going back to treating this like a business arrangement?" Elena's voice rose despite her attempt at control. "I thought we were past that." "We can't be past it." Dominic's voice was hard. "What happened on the coast? That was adrenaline and survival instinct. It doesn't change what this marriage is." The words hit like a slap. Elena felt something inside her crack, the fragile hope she'd been nurturing since that kiss shattering. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" His expression was unreadable. "You want to know what I've been doing for 3 days? I've been cleaning up the mess from taking my eye off the ball. I've been identifying which of my associates knew about the honeymoon and leaked the information. I've been making examples of people so the rest of the city understands that coming after you means death." He paused. "That's who I am, Elena. That's what this world requires. And getting emotionally involved with you makes me weak, makes you vulnerable, and puts everything I've built at risk. So that's it? You're just going to pretend nothing happened? I'm going to keep you safe. That's what I promised, and that's what I'll do. But this fantasy you're building, that we can be something normal, something real, it's dangerous for both of us." Elena stared at him, seeing the walls rebuilding in real time, the vulnerability he'd shown her being locked away behind ice and strategy. "You're a coward." Dominic's eyes flashed. "Excuse me? You heard me. You heard. You're terrified of caring about someone, so you're sabotaging this before it can become real. You'd rather be alone and safe than risk actually feeling something. She stepped closer, refusing to be intimidated. I get it. Your world is violent and unpredictable, and caring about people makes you vulnerable. But pushing me away doesn't make you stronger, Dominic. It just makes you alone. Alone keeps me alive. Does it? Or does it just keep you from living? Elena's voice broke slightly. I didn't ask for this marriage. You forced it on me. But I've been trying to make it work, trying to understand you, trying to see past the monster to the man underneath. And the moment I start to succeed, you run. I'm not running. Yes, you are. You're hiding behind work and violence and this idea that caring about me is a weakness. But you know what? I think you're already past that. I think you already care, and it terrifies you. Dominic moved so fast, Elena didn't have time to react. One moment he was across the desk, the next he had her pressed against the wall, his hands bracketing her head, his body close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. You want to know what terrifies me? His voice was low, dangerous. The fact that when those bullets started flying, my first thought wasn't strategy or survival. It was getting you to safety. The fact that I would have died to protect you without a second thought. The fact that in 3 weeks you've become more important to me than people I've known for years. His forehead dropped to hers. You're right. I am terrified. Because caring about you gives my enemies leverage, and I won't let you become a weapon they can use against me. Elena's breath caught. So what do we do? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him. I've never done this before. Never let anyone get close enough to matter. Then we figure it out together. She reached up, cupped his face. But we do it honestly. No more running, no more pretending this is just business. Dominic closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. If we do this, it changes everything. You stop being just a legal shield and become my actual weakness. Every enemy I have will see you as a target. They already do. The attack proved that. It gets worse from here. You understand that? Being my wife in name was one thing. Being someone I actually care about? That's exponentially more dangerous. I jumped off a cliff with you, Dominic. I think I can handle dangerous. A sound that might have been a laugh escaped him. You're insane. Probably. I married you, didn't I? This time the laugh was real, though edged with darkness. Dominic pulled back enough to look at her properly. If we do this, there are rules. You follow security protocols without question. You trust me when I say something's a threat. You don't take unnecessary risks. And you stop shutting me out. You talk to me instead of disappearing into your office for days. You let me in. Elena held his gaze. Real partnership, Dominic. Not you making all the decisions and me following orders. He considered this, warring emotions playing across his face. Finally, he nodded. Deal. But Elena, this world I'm bringing you into, it's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder, darker. Are you sure you're ready for that? Was she? Elena thought about the woman she'd been a month ago, invisible, drowning, desperate. That woman would have been horrified by what she was agreeing to, but that woman was gone, replaced by someone who'd witnessed murder and survived assassins and started to understand that morality wasn't as simple as she'd once believed. I'm ready, she said. Or I will be. With you. Dominic kissed her then, and it was different from the beach, less desperate, more deliberate. A claim and a promise and an acknowledgement of everything they were becoming. When he finally pulled back, his eyes held something Elena had never seen before. Warmth. Real, genuine warmth. Come with me, he said, taking her hand. There's something you need to see. He led her through the mansion to a wing she hadn't explored, unlocking a door that opened onto stairs descending into darkness. Elena hesitated. It's okay, Dominic said quietly. I'm showing you everything. No more secrets. They descended into what turned out to be a secure basement, not a dungeon or torture chamber like her imagination had conjured, but a command center. Monitors showing various properties and businesses, filing cabinets with records, a conference table where strategy clearly got planned. This is where I run everything, Dominic explained. The legitimate businesses and the less legitimate ones. Victor and I meet here daily. This is the heart of the empire. Why are you showing me this? Because you're right. If we're going to be actual partners, you need to understand what you're part of. He He pulled out a chair at the conference table, gestured for her to sit. My father built this empire on 3 principles: loyalty, strategy, and controlled violence. He taught me that power comes from being willing to do what others won't, that mercy is weakness and sentiment gets you killed. But you don't believe that? Not entirely. No. My mother taught me differently. She said power without purpose is just destruction. That legacy matters more than empire. Dominic sat across from her. When she died, I made a choice. I'd maintain my father's empire because that's what keeps our people safe and employed. But I'd also build something else, something that might balance the scales. The foundations, the charter schools, among other things. Community centers in neighborhoods my father used to just exploit. Scholarships for kids who'd otherwise end up in gangs. Rehabilitation programs for addicts instead of just pushing product. He met her eyes. It doesn't erase the damage, but it's something. Elena processed this, the complexity of the man before her becoming clearer. You're trying to redeem yourself. I'm trying to be less of a monster than I could be. There's a difference. He reached across the table, took her hand. But here's what you need to understand. The violence is real. The empire is built on things that would horrify you. I've done terrible things, Elena. I'll continue doing them. Because the moment I show weakness, the moment I lose control, everything collapses. My people lose their livelihoods. The communities that depend on my foundation work lose support. And my enemies move in to fill the vacuum with people far worse than me. So you're a necessary evil. I'm an evil that's trying to be less evil while maintaining enough evil to survive. It's a precarious balance. His thumb traced circles on her hand. And now you're part of that balance, which means you'll see things that will challenge everything you believe about right and wrong. Can you handle that? Elena thought about her father, about the promise to create beauty in the world, about teaching art to kids who needed hope, about all the simple, clear morality she'd been raised with. Then she thought about the reality she'd learned since that survival sometimes meant compromise, that protection sometimes required violence, that the world wasn't as black and white as she'd wanted to believe. I don't know, she admitted, but I want to try. With you. Dominic studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Then, starting tomorrow, you sit in on my morning briefings. You learn how decisions get made, what factors we consider. You understand the whole picture before judging any part of it. You're serious. You wanted partnership. This is what it looks like. He stood, pulled her up with him. But Elena, once you see everything, you can't unsee it. You'll be complicit. You understand that? She did. This was her line in the sand. Cross it, and she became part of his world completely. Stay on this side and they'd never be equals, never be real partners. Elena took a breath, then stepped forward. Show me everything. The next morning, Elena sat in the command center conference room with Dominic, Victor, and 3 other men who managed different aspects of the empire. They reviewed shipment schedules for legitimate businesses and illegal ones, discussed which politicians needed additional encouragement to support favorable legislation, analyzed threats from rival organizations and planned responses. Elena listened, horrified and fascinated in equal measure, the casual way they discussed bribes and violence, the strategic calculations that treated human lives as chess pieces, the absolute ruthlessness with which they protected their territory. But she also saw the other side, the discussion about increasing wages for dock workers to prevent union unrest, the decision to fund a new community health clinic in an underserved neighborhood, the careful balance between profit and maintaining enough goodwill that communities didn't rebel. What do you think? Dominic asked after the meeting ended and they were alone. I think it's more complicated than I imagined. Elena's head was spinning. You're essentially running a small government, making decisions that affect thousands of people. Tens of thousands, if you count all the businesses and dependents. He poured her coffee from the carafe on the table. The responsibility is why I can't afford to be weak. Too many people counting on me to maintain the structure. But the violence is unfortunate but necessary. The Marchetti family, the one that lost Sophia. They're trying to move in on our dock operations. If I let them, I lose revenue, and my dock workers lose jobs. The legal businesses that depend on port access suffer. So I push back. Sometimes that means violence. He set the coffee in front of her. I'm not asking you to approve, just to understand the context. Elena sipped the coffee, thinking, the man in the parking lot, Marcus. What had he done? Embezzled $2 million over 3 years, money that was supposed to fund pension programs for our legitimate employees. When he got caught, he tried to run instead of making it right. Dominic's voice was matter of fact. I gave him multiple chances to repay. He chose to keep stealing. The execution sent a message. Steal from your own people, and there are consequences. You couldn't have just fired him? Prosecuted him legally? And explain to prosecutors where that $2 million was supposed to go? What those pension programs were for? Some questions invite scrutiny I can't afford. He paused. I'm not saying it was right, Elena. I'm saying it was necessary within the constraints I operate under. The moral gymnastics made her head hurt, but she was beginning to understand the impossible position Dominic occupied, trying to maintain an illegal empire while minimizing harm, trying to build something positive while protecting something dark. I need time to process this, she said finally. Take all the time you need, but while you're processing, he handed her a folder. I need you to look at this. It's a proposal for a new arts education program, fully funded scholarships for underprivileged kids. I thought maybe you'd want to help design the curriculum. Elena opened the folder, scanned the proposal. It was comprehensive, well-funded, targeting exactly the kind of students who needed it most. This is what you've been working on? Among other things, you said teaching mattered to you. This is a way to do it without the security concerns of a public school. He watched her face. If you want it, no pressure. The gift, because that's what it was, an offering designed specifically for her, made Elena's throat tight. I want it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You'll be working with Catherine to implement it. She's terrifying when it comes to project management. Elena laughed despite herself, and something in Dominic's expression softened. This, she realized, was what partnership looked like in his world. Brutal honesty about the darkness, combined with efforts to build light, acknowledging the violence while trying to create beauty anyway. She could work with that. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Mornings in the command center, learning the business. Afternoons working on the arts program with Catherine. Evenings with Dominic, talking about everything and nothing, building the foundation of something that felt increasingly real. The physical intimacy grew gradually. A hand held across the dinner table. Kisses goodnight that lingered longer each time. The night Elena finally crossed the hallway from her wing to his, standing at his door at midnight, uncertain and wanting. Dominic had opened the door in sleeping pants, bare-chested, and for a moment they just looked at each other. I don't want to sleep alone anymore, Elena had said quietly. He'd pulled her inside, kissed her with a hunger that had been building for weeks, and they'd finally stopped pretending distance was sustainable. The night that followed had been revelation, gentle and intense, Dominic worshiping her body like she was precious, Elena discovering that vulnerability with him felt like strength rather than weakness. Afterward, lying tangled in his sheets, Elena had traced the scars on his chest. Tell me about these. Reminders, Dominic had said, of times I wasn't fast enough or careful enough, of why I can't afford to be weak. You're not weak. Elena had kissed each scar. You're human. There's a difference. That had been 6 weeks after the wedding. By 8 weeks, Elena couldn't remember what her life had been like before. The fear had transformed into something else. Not love, not yet, but the foundation of it. Trust built on honesty. Partnership built on mutual respect. Desire built on genuine connection. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Elena struggled with the moral compromises, with knowing that the money funding her arts program came partly from illegal sources. She fought with Dominic about his methods, about whether violence was truly necessary. He pushed back, defending decisions she couldn't quite accept. But they kept talking, kept trying, kept building something neither had expected. 3 months after the wedding, Elena got the call that her mother had taken a turn. She'd been visiting regularly, the security now feeling routine rather than oppressive. But this was different. The nursing home director's voice, grave, suggesting Elena should come soon. Dominic found her packing with shaking hands. What's wrong? My mother, they think it's the end. Elena's voice cracked. I need to go. I'll drive you. Not a question, a statement. They made it to the nursing home in 20 minutes, Marco following in a second car for security. Elena's mother looked small in the hospital bed they'd brought into her room, her breathing labored, her eyes unfocused. Mom. Elena took her hand. I'm here. It's Elena. For a moment, nothing. Then her mother's eyes focused and clarity returned. Brief, precious clarity. My baby girl, you came. Of course I came. Tears streamed down Elena's face. Her mother's gaze moved to Dominic, standing respectfully back. Who's this? This is Dominic, my husband. Husband. A smile, faint but real. You got married and didn't tell me? It was quick, private. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, be happy. Her mother's hand squeezed weakly. Are you happy, Elena? The question hung in the air. Elena looked back at Dominic, at the man who'd forced her into marriage and then somehow become her partner, her protector, maybe even her friend, at the complicated, impossible relationship they'd built from nothing. Yes, she said, surprised to realize it was true. I am. Good. Her mother's eyes drifted closed. That's all I wanted. For you to be happy. To find someone who sees you. He does, Mom. He sees me. They stayed for 6 more hours, Elena holding her mother's hand, Dominic a steady presence behind her. When the end came, it was peaceful, a gradual slowing of breath, then stillness. Elena sobbed into Dominic's chest in the hallway afterward, and he held her without speaking, just solid and there and exactly what she needed. No platitudes, no empty comfort, just presence. Thank you, she whispered eventually, for coming with me. Where else would I be? He kissed her forehead. You're my wife, Elena. The real kind now. That means I'm here for all of it. The funeral was small. A handful of her mother's former colleagues, some nurses from the home, Catherine and Victor representing Dominic's household. Dominic stood beside Elena throughout, his hand on her back, steady and grounding. Afterward, back at the mansion, Elena felt hollowed out. The last tie to her old life was gone. She was fully in Dominic's world now, no family to anchor her to who she'd been. Come with me, Dominic said that evening. He led her to the sunroom, the one his mother had designed. But it looked different. New plants had been added, arranged around a small corner that had been set up like an art studio. Easel, paints, canvases, everything she'd need to create. I thought you might need this, Dominic said quietly. A space to make beauty, like your father taught you. Elena stared at the studio, at this tangible proof that he'd been listening, that he understood what she needed. When did you do this? Been working on it for a few weeks. Wasn't sure when the right time was, but he shrugged. Seemed like now. She turned to him, this complicated man who'd destroyed her life and rebuilt it into something she'd never imagined. I love you. The words surprised them both. They hung in the air, shocking and true. Dominic's eyes widened. Elena, I know, it's insane. 3 months ago I hated you. But somewhere between surviving assassins and learning your empire and you building me an art studio? Her voice broke. I love you, Dominic. I don't know when it happened, but it's real. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupped her face in his hands. I love you too. Have for weeks. Was terrified to say it. Why? Because loving you makes you a target, makes me vulnerable, makes everything more complicated. Everything was already complicated. Fair point. He kissed her, soft and deep and full of promise. I love you, Elena Ravello, and I'm going to spend the rest of our lives keeping you safe and making you happy. In that order? She smiled through tears. Simultaneously, he rested his forehead against hers. You've changed everything, you know. Made me want to be better than I am. Made me believe I could be. You're already better than you think. I'm really not, but I'm trying. For you. They stood together in his mother's sunroom, surrounded by growing things and art supplies, and Elena felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or purpose. The understanding that she'd found her place, unexpected as it was. The next morning, Elena woke to Dominic's phone ringing insistently. He grabbed it, listened, and his entire body went rigid. When? A pause. How many? Another pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was out of bed, dressing quickly. Elena sat up, fear trickling down her spine. What's wrong? Betrayal. Someone inside my organization has been feeding information to the Marchettis. They're moving on 3 of our operations simultaneously. His voice was cold, focused. I need to handle this. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. This is going to get violent. Then I'll wait in the car with Marco. But Dominic, she grabbed his hand. We're partners now. You don't shut me out when things get hard. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Fine. But you stay in the car. If shooting starts, Marco drives you straight home. Understood? Understood. They drove to a warehouse in the industrial district, Victor meeting them with a grim expression. We've got him isolated inside. Thomas confirmed it. He's been on Marchetti's payroll for 6 months. Thomas! Dominic's jaw clenched. Thomas, who'd been with them for years, who'd managed security, who Elena had met her first week. Elena stayed in the car as promised, watching through tinted windows as Dominic and Victor entered the warehouse with 4 armed men. Marco kept the engine running, ready to flee if necessary. 20 minutes passed. 30. Then gunfire erupted inside the warehouse. Brief, sharp, then silence. Elena's heart hammered. Marco's hand moved to his weapon, but he didn't drive. Wait, he said quietly. Boss is fine. If he wasn't, they'd signal. 5 more minutes. Then Dominic emerged, blood on his shirt, his expression carved from stone. He climbed into the car and Marco drove without needing instruction. Are you hurt? Elena asked. Not my blood. His voice was flat. Thomas tried to shoot Victor. I handled it. Handled. Killed, he meant. Dominic had killed someone who'd betrayed them. Elena should have been horrified, should have felt sick. Instead, she felt only relief that he'd survived, that the threat was eliminated, that they were safe. When had she become someone for whom murder was an acceptable solution? Back at the mansion, Dominic showered while Elena waited in his room. When he emerged, he looked exhausted, older than his 34 years. I'm sorry you saw that, he said quietly. I didn't see it. I was in the car. You know what happened. That's close enough. He sat on the bed beside her. This is the reality, Elena. This is what protecting our empire looks like. If you can't handle it, stop. She took his hand. I can handle it. I don't like it. I wish there were better options, but I understand why it was necessary. And I'm not going anywhere. He pulled her close, held her like she might disappear. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you've got me anyway. They stayed like that until his breathing evened out, until the tension left his shoulders. Then Elena pulled back enough to look at him. I want to do more, she said, with the foundation work. The arts program is great, but I want to expand it. Music, theater, creative writing. Give kids more options. Okay, work with Catherine, build a proposal. And I want to visit the community centers, see what else is needed. Maybe start a mentorship program connecting at-risk kids with business opportunities in your legitimate operations. Dominic studied her. You're building your own empire within mine. I'm building purpose. You said power without purpose is just destruction, so I'm choosing purpose. She held his gaze. We can't undo the violence, but we can balance it with creation, with opportunity, with hope. When did you become so wise? When I married someone who showed me the world is more complicated than I thought. Elena smiled. You broke me down, Dominic. Now I'm building myself back up. Different, but maybe better. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Elena knew she'd made the right choice. This life, this man, this complicated, beautiful, terrible partnership, it was hers, and she was going to make it mean something. Over the next year, Elena's programs expanded across the city. Arts education, mentorship, job training, all of it funded by Dominic's empire, all of it making tangible differences. Kids who would have joined gangs found other paths. Families struggling found support. Communities that had been exploited began to thrive. The balance wasn't perfect. Dominic still ran an empire built partly on illegal foundations. Violence still happened when necessary, but Elena's presence had shifted something fundamental. He chose negotiation more often than elimination, invested in communities rather than just extracting from them, became something closer to a necessary evil doing genuine good than just a crime lord pretending at redemption. And Elena, she'd transformed from invisible art teacher to someone who mattered, who made decisions affecting thousands, who stood beside one of the most powerful men in the city and made him better through her presence. 18 months after the wedding, Elena stood in the bathroom staring at a positive pregnancy test, her hands shaking. She'd been feeling off for weeks, had attributed it to stress from a particularly difficult program launch. But no, this was different. She was pregnant. Dominic found her still standing there 20 minutes later, test clutched in her hand. He took one look at her face and went still. Elena? She held up the test wordlessly. For a moment, he just stared. Then a smile spread across his face, genuine, unguarded joy that she'd only seen a handful of times. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby," she laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to do this, how to raise a child in this world. We'll figure it out, together." He pulled her close, one hand moving protectively to her still flat stomach. "I'm going to give our child everything I didn't have. Safety. Options. The choice to be something other than what I became. And if they want to be like you, then I'll teach them to be the best version of it, the version you've been helping me become." He kissed her softly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing this life. For choosing me. For making me want to be better." His hand splayed across her stomach. "For giving me a future I didn't know I wanted." Elena leaned into him, feeling the baby flutter inside her. Imagination, probably, too early for real movement. But the symbolism was clear. New life growing from impossible circumstances, hope emerging from darkness. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, both of you." Dominic held her as the sun set through the windows, painting their world in gold. "Everything I am, everything I have, it's yours. Always." And standing there in the mansion that had once been a prison, in the arms of the man who'd once been her captor, Elena felt nothing but gratitude. For the choices that had led here. For the partnership they'd built. For the future stretching before them, complicated and dangerous and absolutely theirs. She'd been a witness who shouldn't have existed. A liability that should have been eliminated. A wife acquired through necessity rather than love. But she'd become something else entirely. Someone who understood that morality was complex, that power could build as well as destroy, that love sometimes grew in the darkest soil and bloomed all the stronger for it. Elena Moore had died in that parking lot 3 months ago. Elena Ravello had been born from the ashes, stronger, wiser, more capable than she'd ever imagined. And she was just getting started. The empire she and Dominic would build together, the legacy they'd leave their child, it would be messy and complicated and morally gray. But it would be theirs. And it would matter. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.